She walked away from a crown most women would kill for, left a king standing at the altar, abandoned a throne that promised her everything: power, safety, belonging. They called her a fool, a coward, a girl too wild to be tamed by civilization. They were wrong. This is the story of Arden Vale, the girl who raised wolves, loved two brothers, and chose freedom over a kingdom. A story of survival, impossible choices, and the kind of love that doesn't bow to crowns or courts. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button and stay until the very end, because what happens at that crossroads will leave you breathless. The first time Arden Vale defied nature, she was 8 years old and armed with nothing but a fallen branch and a scream that echoed through the pines. The bear was massive, a wall of fur and rage that had already torn through half the underbrush looking for the source of the crying. Two wolf pups, barely weaned, huddled against a rotted log while their mother's corpse cooled 10 feet away, her throat ripped open by the same predator now closing in on her young. Arden didn't think. Thinking was for people who had options, who had parents waiting at home, who had never spent a winter eating pine bark because the hunting was poor. She'd been surviving in these woods since her father died, and her mother followed him 6 months later, leaving her with a trapper uncle who drank more than he trapped and forgot she existed most days. So when she saw those pups, golden-eyed and trembling, too young to run, something ancient and fierce kicked alive in her chest. She stepped between them and the bear. "Get back!" Her voice cracked, high and thin. The branch shook in her hands. "Get back!" The bear paused, not because an 8-year-old girl posed any threat, but because the sheer audacity of her standing there, all 70 pounds of dirt-smudged defiance, confused its simple predator brain just long enough. Arden didn't wait for it to figure things out. She swung the branch against a tree, cracking it loud as a gunshot. Then again, and again, screaming until her throat burned, making herself bigger, louder, more trouble than 2 scrawny pups were worth. The bear huffed, dropped to all fours, turned with deliberate slowness, and lumbered back into the shadows, leaving Arden shaking so hard her knees buckled. She collapsed beside the pups, who immediately crawled into her lap, whimpering and nuzzling against her worn coat. Their fur was soft, softer than anything she'd touched in months. "It's okay," she whispered, even though nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for a long time. "I've got you." She didn't know what she was promising, didn't know she was making a choice that would shape the next 10 years of her life, that would lead to love and war and a throne she never wanted. All she knew was they were alone, and so was she, and that seemed like reason enough. Arden's uncle noticed the pups 3 days later, mostly because one of them peed on his bedroll. The hell are those? Marcus Vale squinted at the 2 bundles of fur currently wrestling over a strip of dried venison Arden had snuck from the smokehouse. "Wolf pups. Their mother died. I'm keeping them." "Like hell you are. They'll die without me." "Things die in the woods, girl. That's nature." Marcus scratched his beard, which was less beard and more neglected face forest. "Can't feed 2 damn wolves when I can barely feed you." Arden crossed her arms. At 8, she'd already learned that Marcus responded to 2 things: stubbornness and utility. Tears didn't work. Begging made him mean. "They'll earn their keep. Wolves are good hunters, better than you." That last part slipped out before she could catch it. Marcus's expression darkened. "Watch your mouth." "It's true. When's the last time you brought home anything bigger than a rabbit?" She was pushing it. Knew it, didn't care. The pups had slept curled against her the past 3 nights, their heartbeats steady and warm, and she'd felt less alone than she had since her parents died. She wasn't giving that up. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he spat into the dirt. "Fine, but they pull their weight or they're gone. And if they bite me, I shoot them. Understood?" "Understood." He stomped off, muttering about ungrateful children and unnatural attachments. Arden waited until he was out of sight, then scooped up both pups, holding them close. "You're safe," she whispered into their fur. "I promise." The smaller one, the runt, with a white patch on his chest, licked her chin. The larger one, darker and already showing the broad shoulders that would define him later, pushed his head under her hand, demanding attention. She named them that night, sitting by the fire while Marcus snored in his corner. The big one became Ronan, after a king in one of her mother's old stories. The smaller one became Kael, after a hero who saved his kingdom with cleverness instead of strength. They were wolf pups. She was a lonely girl. None of them knew they were writing the opening chapter of something much bigger. The years that followed were hard in the way that survival is always hard. A grinding, relentless thing that leaves calluses on your hands and scars on your heart. Arden grew up lean and quick, learning to track, to hunt, to read the forest like a language. The wolves grew up beside her, bigger and stranger than any wolves the local trappers had seen. By the time Arden was 12 and the wolves were 4, they stood nearly to her shoulder, their eyes unsettlingly intelligent, their movements coordinated in ways that seemed almost human. Marcus noticed. So did others. "Those aren't right," old Thomas muttered one day at the trading post, watching Ronan and Kale wait patiently outside while Arden bartered for salt. "Too big, too smart. You see how they look at folks?" "They're just well trained," the clerk said, but his hand stayed near the rifle under the counter. Arden heard the whispers, heard the word unnatural more than once. She ignored it all, because Ronan and Kael were the only constants in her life, the only things that hadn't left or died or disappointed her. They hunted together, slept in a pile on cold nights, Arden wedged between two massive bodies that radiated heat. When Marcus got drunk and mean, they positioned themselves between him and Arden, silent and watchful until he backed down. When she was 14, Arden woke to find Marcus gone. No note, no explanation. Just empty space where a mediocre guardian had been. She wasn't surprised, wasn't even upset. She had everything she needed. "Just us now," she told the wolves, running her fingers through Ronan's thick fur. "Like it should be." Kale pressed against her other side, and for a moment she could swear she saw something flicker in his golden eyes. Understanding that went deeper than animal instinct. Then he licked her face, shattering the moment, and she laughed, shoving him away. "Gross, you just ate a rabbit." They were her family, her pack, and if sometimes she caught them watching her with expressions too thoughtful for wolves, too weighted with something that looked almost like longing, well, she figured she was imagining things. She had no idea how wrong she was. The change happened 3 weeks after Arden's 18th birthday, on a night when the moon hung full and heavy over the pines. She woke to voices, not growls or howls, voices, human voices, low and urgent, speaking words she couldn't quite catch. Arden sat up slowly, heart hammering. The cabin was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. The space where Ronan and Kael usually slept was empty. The voices came from outside. She grabbed her knife, the good one, with the bone handle her father had carved, and moved to the window. What she saw made her grip the sill so hard her knuckles went white. 2 men stood in the clearing, naked, arguing in heated whispers. One was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that fell past his ears and a presence that seemed to fill the space around him. The other was leaner, compact, with a white scar cutting across his chest and movements that suggested coiled energy waiting to spring. It took Arden's brain several seconds to catch up with what her eyes were seeing, several more to process the impossible. She knew that scar. She'd watched it form when the wolf she'd named Kale, had gotten caught in a hunter's trap at 6 months old. She'd stayed up all night cleaning the wound, keeping infection at bay through sheer stubborn will. She knew those shoulders, had buried her face against them 1,000 times, seeking comfort from the wolf she'd named Ronan. "This is insane," the leaner man, it was Kael, hissed. "We should have told her years ago." "And said what?" Ronan's voice was deeper, rougher. "We didn't know what we were until 2 years ago. You want to go back in time and explain to a 16-year-old girl that the wolves she raised are actually shapeshifters who've been lying to her?" "We weren't lying. We didn't know." "She won't see it that way." Arden stopped breathing. Shapeshifters. The word hung in the air like smoke, impossible and yet explaining everything. The intelligence in their eyes, the way they understood commands too complex for animals, the feeling she'd always had that something was different about them. "We have to tell her now," Kael said, "before someone else does. Before she finds out we're not—" "Not what? Not the pets she thinks we are?" Ronan's laugh was bitter. "Face it, Kael. We're the worst kind of lie, the kind where the truth ruins everything." "Maybe. But she deserves to know. Kael paused. And we need to leave. Soon. The summons came again. If we don't answer this time, they'll send hunters. Let them. I'm not going back to that world. It's not about what you want. It's about what we are. We can't hide forever. Silence fell. Arden's mind raced, trying to fit this new reality over the old one, struggling to reconcile the wolves she'd loved with these men standing in her clearing, arguing about summons and hunters and worlds she didn't understand. Then Ronan spoke again, quieter now. Do you think she suspects? No. Why would she? We've been careful. Not careful enough. Last week when she fell in the river, I pulled her out without thinking. Wolves don't do that. They don't dive into rapids to save drowning humans. You panicked. We both did. Because she's not just our friend, Kael. She's... Ronan cut himself off. This is exactly why we need to leave. Before we do something even more stupid. Arden pressed her forehead against the window frame, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. 10 years. 10 years she'd spent with them, never knowing, never guessing. How many moments had she missed? How many times had they understood her perfectly, responded to nuances no animal should have caught? And she'd just written it off as a deep bond. God, she'd bathed in front of them, changed clothes, talked about her hopes and fears and the boys in town she thought were cute, treating them like... Her stomach turned. They weren't wolves. Hadn't been for at least 2 years, if she was understanding this correctly. Which meant every intimate, private moment she'd shared, thinking she was alone with her pets. Shame burned through her, followed quickly by anger. She was at the door before she'd made a conscious decision to move, flinging it open hard enough that it bounced off the wall. Both men spun to face her. In the moonlight, she could see them clearly now, the features she should have recognized if she'd been looking for them. Ronan with his dark eyes that had always seemed too knowing, Kael with his sharp cheekbones and the slight frame that had never quite filled out the way a wolf shoaled. How long? Her voice shook. How long have you been able to do this? They stared at her. Neither spoke. How long? 2 years, Kael said finally. His voice, God, his voice. She'd imagined it 100 different ways, but never like this, never so raw and real. We figured it out 2 years ago, during the winter when you were sick with fever. We changed for the first time and didn't know how to change back for 3 days. 2 years. 2 years of lies by omission. 2 years of her pouring her heart out to what she thought were animals, while they... Were you laughing at me? The words came out small, hurt. All those times I talked to you like you were pets. Were you laughing? No. Ronan moved toward her. She stepped back. He froze. Arden, no. We never... It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been playing some sick game, letting me make a fool of myself while you... We were trying to protect you, Kael interrupted. From exactly this. From finding out that the wolves you saved are part of a world you don't understand, can't be part of. And that would destroy you if it found you. What world? What are you talking about? The two men exchanged a look. In it, Arden saw years of communication, of understanding that went deeper than words. It made her feel more alone than she had in a decade. We're not wolves, Ronan said slowly. Not entirely. We're shifters. Part of a society that's existed in shadow for centuries. When you saved us, we were pups. Too young to know what we were, too young to shift. We grew up thinking we were wolves, but when we came of age, everything changed, Kael finished. We remembered who we are, where we came from, the families that probably think we're dead. Arden's mind spun. You have families? Had. Maybe. It's complicated. Kael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so human it made her chest ache. Our pack was attacked when we were infants. We don't know who survived. We don't know if anyone's looking for us. But there are laws in our world. All shifters must be registered, must belong to a pack. And recently the summons started coming. What summons? From the Alpha King, Ronan said, and something in his tone made it clear that was a title with weight. He's calling all unregistered shifters to present themselves. To be judged, assigned to packs, fitted into the hierarchy. His jaw tightened. We've been ignoring it, but they're getting more insistent. So go, get registered, join a pack. Arden crossed her arms, trying to sound like this wasn't tearing her apart. Clearly, you've got a whole life waiting for you. Why are you still here? Both men stared at her like she'd said something incomprehensible. Because you're here, Kael said finally. Simply. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The words hit her harder than they should have. She shook her head, fighting against the pull of them. I'm not your responsibility anymore. You don't owe me anything. I'm everything, Ronan said quietly. You're everything, Arden. You saved us, raised us, gave us a life when we should have died in those woods. You think we'd just leave you? You lied to me for 2 years. We were scared, Kael stepped forward. We were terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd look at us differently, that we'd lose the only home we've ever known. Can you honestly say we were wrong? Arden opened her mouth, closed it. Because he wasn't wrong. She was looking at them differently. Everything had changed in the space of 10 minutes, and she didn't know how to process it. These weren't her wolves. These were men. Men who'd seen her vulnerable, heard her secrets, been present for every private moment of the past 2 years. The intimacy of it crashed over her. All those nights sleeping curled against them, all those times she'd absently touched them, petted them, sought comfort in their warmth. It had felt innocent when they were wolves. Now, I need time, she said. I need to think. Arden, please. She looked at Kael, then Ronan, trying to find the animals she'd known in these strangers' faces. Just give me time. She went back inside before either could respond, closing the door and leaning against it, sliding down until she sat on the floor. Outside, she heard murmured conversation, then the sound of shifting, bones cracking, bodies reforming. When she looked out the window again, 2 wolves sat in the clearing, watching the cabin with identical expressions of patient worry. Arden closed her eyes and tried to figure out how her entire world had turned upside down in the space of a single night. Dawn came, and with it, a fragile new normal. Arden emerged to find Ronan and Kael in wolf form, looking at her with cautious hope. For a moment, she considered demanding they stay human, that they face her as what they really were. But she wasn't ready for that yet. Wasn't ready to reconcile the men she'd seen with the companions she'd known. Okay, she said to the clearing, to them, to the universe. New rules. When I'm around, you're wolves unless I say otherwise. When I'm not around, you can be whatever you want. But we don't talk about it, not yet. It was cowardice, and she knew it. A way to avoid processing the impossible. But they didn't argue, just lowered their heads in acknowledgement. Life continued. Arden hunted, trapped, maintained the cabin. Ronan and Kael shadowed her in wolf form, same as always. Except now, every interaction carried weight it hadn't before. When Kael brought her a rabbit, she wondered if he'd actually hunted it or just grabbed one from a snare and played along. When Ronan positioned himself between her and a suspicious trader in town, she questioned whether it was protective instinct or calculated decision-making. The easy affection she'd always shown them dried up. She couldn't bring herself to pet them, to press her face into their fur, to whisper secrets like she used to. Because they weren't just wolves anymore, and the boundaries had shifted in ways she didn't know how to navigate. A week passed, then 2. The distance between them grew. One night, she woke to find the cabin empty again. Voices outside arguing. This isn't working, Kael's voice, frustrated. She can barely look at us. Give her time. We don't have time. The 3rd summons came today. If we ignore it, they'll send enforcers. And when they find us, they'll find her too. Silence. Then Ronan. What are you suggesting? We answer the summons. We go, get registered, fulfill whatever obligations they require. Then we come back. You think they'll just let us leave? We're unmated males of prime age, Ronan. They'll assign us to packs, probably try to marry us off to suitable females to strengthen bloodlines. We won't be coming back. Arden's breath caught. Marriage. She hadn't considered that, hadn't thought about them building lives that didn't include her. The realization of how much that bothered her was unwelcome. Then we refuse, Kael said stubbornly. And get executed for defying the Alpha King? Great plan. So what, we just leave her? Abandon the only person who ever gave a damn about us? We take her with us. The suggestion hung in the air. Arden leaned closer to the window, heart pounding. To the court? Kael sounded incredulous. Ronan, she's human. They'd eat her alive, politically and possibly literally. She's not just human. She's ours. Our pack. That has to count for something. In what world does the Alpha King care about a human's claim to shifters? In a world where those shifters are about to be revealed as the lost heirs to one of the oldest bloodlines in the kingdom. The words fell like stones. Arden watched Kyle go still. What are you talking about? Ronan pulled something from his pocket, a letter, creased and worn. I've been doing research. The pack that was attacked when we were pups? It wasn't random violence, it was a targeted assassination. Our father was high nobility, Kyle, second only to the Alpha King himself. When he and most of our pack died, the bloodline was thought to be extinct. But we're not. No. We're very much alive, and if we present ourselves at court, if we reclaim our heritage, Ronan's voice went hard. We'd have power, status, enough to protect her, enough to make demands. Kale was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about walking into the lion's den. I'm talking about making sure Arden has a choice. Right now, she's a human who knows our secret. That makes her a liability. If we leave her here, eventually someone will find out. And when they do, she'll be silenced, permanently. Ice flooded Arden's veins. She'd been so focused on feeling betrayed, she hadn't considered she might be in actual danger. But if she's under our protection, Ronan continued, claimed as our pack, presented to the court as the one who saved the last of our bloodline, they can't touch her. Won't dare. This is insane, Kyle said, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. We'd be throwing her into a world of politics and power plays she doesn't understand, as opposed to leaving her here to die when the enforcers come asking questions. Silence. Arden made her decision. She opened the door and stepped out. Both men turned to face her, and she saw the moment they realized she'd been listening. Guilt flashed across Kyle's features. Ronan just looked resigned. If I go with you, she said, voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut, what happens to me? Ronan met her eyes. Honestly, I don't know. The court is dangerous, complicated. You'd be an outsider in a world that doesn't trust outsiders, but you'd be alive. And you'd be with us. And if I stay, you die. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. He didn't soften it, didn't try to sugarcoat. Our secret dies with you, one way or another. I'd prefer it not be literally. Arden looked between them. These men who used to be her wolves, who were now something she didn't fully understand but couldn't imagine living without. When do we leave? Kale exhaled roughly. Arden, you don't have to... Don't. Yes, I do. You're right. If I stay, I'm a loose end. And I didn't survive this long in the woods by ignoring threats. She straightened her shoulders. So when do we leave? The two men exchanged glances. Something passed between them. Relief, worry, determination. 3 days, Ronan said. We need to prepare. And we need to teach you some things about our world before you walk into it blind. Then start teaching. And so began Arden Vale's education in a world she never knew existed. A world of power, politics, and predators wearing human skin. A world that would test every survival skill she'd ever learned and demand she learn 100 more. She thought the wilderness had been harsh. She had no idea. 3 days wasn't enough time to learn centuries of culture, but Ronan and Kyle tried anyway. They sat in the cabin on the first night, human-shaped and awkward in the small space that had always felt comfortable when they were wolves. Arden perched on her chair, trying not to stare at the way firelight played across Kyle's features, the way Ronan's shoulders filled the corner he'd claimed. The court operates on hierarchy, Ronan began. Everyone has a rank, Alpha King at the top, then high nobility, lesser nobility, common pack members, and Omegas at the bottom. What are you? Arden asked. Technically, high nobility. Our father was the Alpha King's brother. She blinked. You're princes. We're survivors of a massacre that happened when we were too young to remember it, Kyle corrected. There's a difference. Not to them there won't be. Ronan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. When we walk into that court, we're walking in as the last remnants of a bloodline everyone thought was extinct. Some will see us as heroes. Others will see us as threats. And me? Silence. You're the wild card, Kyle said finally. A human who raised shifter nobility. Who knows our secret? Who we're claiming as pack? Can you do that? Claim a human? Technically, no. Pack bonds or blood bonds. But there are exceptions for extreme debt, for life-saving intervention. What you did, raising us, keeping us alive when we should have died, that creates an obligation the court has to recognize. Has to or will? Ronan's expression went dark. That's the question, isn't it? The second night, they taught her the rules. Don't challenge a dominant directly. Don't show weakness. Don't back down if someone tests you, but don't escalate unless you're prepared to fight to the death. That's insane, Arden said. How does anyone survive? Most don't question the system. They find their place in the hierarchy and stay there. Kale's voice carried an edge. It's only people like us, outsiders, unknowns, who have to fight for every inch of respect. So I should expect to fight. You should expect war, Ronan said bluntly. They're going to test you, push you, try to prove you don't belong, and the second you break, they'll tear you apart. Arden thought of the woods, of winters that tried to kill her, of hunger and cold, and the constant threat of death. She'd survived worse than politics. At least, that's what she told herself. The third night, Kyle asked the question that had been hovering between them since the beginning. Why did you agree to come? Arden looked up from the pack she was assembling, simple supplies, things she'd need for travel. You said I'd die if I stayed. That's not an answer. She stopped packing, met his eyes, golden, intense, nothing like the simple animal gaze she'd grown up with. You're my family, she said quietly. Stupid, lying, shape-shifting family. But family. Where else would I go? Something shifted in Kyle's expression. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. Ronan watched them both with an unreadable expression. Then he stood. We leave at dawn. Get some sleep. He shifted and padded outside, leaving Arden alone with Kyle. He's scared, Kyle said after a moment. He won't admit it, but he is. Going back to that world means accepting what we are, what we're supposed to be. And Ronan's never been good at meeting expectations. What about you? Kyle smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm terrified, but I'm more scared of what happens if we don't go. He stood, moved toward the door, paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're coming, even if it's selfish. Then he was gone, shifting mid-stride, leaving Arden alone with her thoughts and the weight of a choice she couldn't take back. The journey to the court took 5 days of hard travel through territories Arden had never seen. Ronan and Kyle stayed in wolf form most of the time, ranging ahead to scout, circling back to guide her through difficult terrain. It should have felt normal, familiar. Instead, every moment reminded her of what had changed. When Kyle brought her water from a stream, she wondered if he'd chosen that particular spot because he knew she was thirsty or because he'd calculated it was the safest place to stop. When Ronan positioned himself between her and an approaching stranger on the road, she questioned whether it was instinct or strategy. The easy trust had fractured, and she didn't know how to repair it. On the fourth night, camped in a clearing that smelled of pine and approaching rain, she woke to find both of them human again, talking in low voices. We're close, Ronan was saying, maybe 6 hours out. We should go over the plan again. The plan is we walk in, announce ourselves, and hope we don't get killed in the first 5 minutes. Reassuring. You want me to lie? Ronan sighed. When we present ourselves, I do the talking. Arden stays between us, doesn't speak unless directly addressed by the Alpha King himself. She's going to hate that. She's going to be alive. That's what matters. Arden sat up. I'm awake. And he's right. I do hate it. Both men turned. In the firelight, she could see tension written across their features. It's not about control, Ronan said. It's about survival. The court respects power and hierarchy. You walking in as an equal would be seen as insulting, challenging, grounds for someone to make an example of me. Arden stood, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. I understand the politics. Doesn't mean I have to like them. You don't have to like them, Kyle said quietly. You just have to survive them. She looked between them. These men who used to be simple, who used to be safe, who were now complicated and dangerous and still somehow hers. Tell me honestly, what are the odds I walk out of that court alive? Ronan met her gaze steadily. If we do everything right, 60%, maybe 70 if we're lucky. And if things go wrong, then we fight our way out or die trying. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Death had been stalking her since she was 8 years old. At least this time she'd see it coming. Then let's make sure we do everything right. What? The court of the Alpha King wasn't a building. It was a city. Arden stood at the edge of the tree line, staring at a sprawl of structures that seemed to grow organically from the forest itself. Stone and wood blended seamlessly, buildings rising 3 and 4 stories, connected by bridges and walkways that wove through the canopy. "Welcome to Silverpine," Kael said, human now, and dressed in clothes they'd acquired from a trader 2 days ago. Simple but well-made, enough to suggest status without claiming too much of it. Capital of the Shifter world, home to about 3,000 of our kind, and the seat of the Alpha King's power. 3,000. Arden had never seen more than 50 people in one place in her entire life. "Breathe," Ronan said from her other side. He wore black, stark, and severe. His dark hair pulled back to reveal features that were both familiar and strange. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine." "You're terrified." "That too." Despite herself, Arden smiled. Ronan's lips quirked in response, barely there, but real. They walked into the city with Arden between them, a protective formation that drew immediate attention. People stopped to stare. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Someone whispered, "Who are they?" The architecture was beautiful in a way that made Arden's chest ache. Everything she'd grown up with had been rough, functional, designed for survival rather than aesthetics. This was art. This was culture. This was a world that had flourished while she'd been struggling to not starve in the woods. The weight of her otherness settled over her like a cloak. They climbed through the city, always upward, following paths that seemed designed to humble visitors with their grandeur. Finally, they reached a massive building at the summit, more palace than hall, with columns carved to look like trees and a roof that disappeared into the canopy above. Guards flanked the entrance. They wore no uniforms, but the way they moved marked them as dangerous. "State your business," one said. His eyes lingered on Arden with open suspicion. "We're here to answer the summons," Ronan said. His voice carried an authority Arden had never heard before. "I am Ronan Blackthorn, son of Marcus Blackthorn, of the bloodline thought lost. This is Kyle Blackthorn, my brother. And this is Arden Vale, who stands under our protection as Pack." The guard's expression shifted from suspicion to shock. "Blackthorn? That's not possible. The Blackthorns are dead." "Yes, we've heard." Kael's smile was sharp. "Yet here we stand. Funny how that works." The guards exchanged glances. One disappeared into the building. The other gestured them forward with visible reluctance. "You'll wait in the antechamber. The Alpha King will decide if he'll see you." They were ushered into a room designed to intimidate. High ceilings, stone walls carved with the history of the Shifter people. Arden recognized some of the scenes, battles, hunts, great leaders standing victorious over fallen enemies. Violence was woven into every aspect of this culture. "Don't let them see you're nervous," Ronan murmured. "Stand straight. Meet eyes if someone challenges you, but don't hold the gaze too long. And whatever happens, stay between us." "You've said that 6 times now." "Because it's important." The door opened. A woman entered, tall, elegant, with silver blonde hair and eyes that cataloged everything in a single sweep. She wore authority like a second skin. "Well," she said, voice cool as river water, "this is unexpected." Ronan inclined his head, a gesture that suggested respect without submission. "Lady Morrigan, it's been a long time. 20 years, give or take. I thought you were dead." "Common misconception." Morrigan's gaze moved to Kael, then landed on Arden and stayed there. Her expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. "And who is this?" "Arden Vale," Arden said before either brother could answer. If she was going to be judged, she'd be judged for her own words. "I'm the human who raised them," Morrigan finished. "Yes, I can smell the mortality on you. How quaint." The word landed like a slap. Arden felt her spine stiffen. "Quaint?" Kael's voice went dangerous. "She saved our lives when we were puppies." Yes, very heroic. Morgan's smile was winter cold. But this isn't the wilderness, and sentiment doesn't grant status here. The Alpha King will see you now. Try not to embarrass your bloodline more than you already have by bringing a pet to court. She swept out. Ronan caught Kael's arm before he could follow. Let it go. She just called Arden a pet. And she'll say worse before this is over. We knew this wouldn't be easy. Arden touched Kael's shoulder. She's right, you know. I am a pet here. Human, powerless, other. Getting angry won't change that. You're not. I am, and that's fine. I didn't come here to be accepted. I came here to survive. She walked toward the door, leaving both brothers staring after her. If they expected her to crumble at the first insult, they didn't know her at all. The throne room was everything the antechamber promised, and more. Massive, ornate, filled with people who radiated power like heat. And at the center, on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, sat the Alpha King. He was younger than Arden expected, maybe 40, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes that seemed to see through flesh to bone. When he looked at them, Arden felt the weight of centuries of authority. Approach, he said. His voice carried without effort, filling the space. They walked forward. Arden kept her gaze down, remembering Ronan's instructions. Don't challenge. Don't provoke. Don't give them a reason to kill you in the first 5 minutes. You claim to be Blackthorns. The Alpha King leaned forward slightly. The last Blackthorns died 20 years ago when Marcus Blackthorn and his pack were slaughtered by rogues. I attended their memorial myself. You attended a memorial for bodies that were never found, Ronan said. Because we weren't dead. We were pups. Too young to shift. Too young to defend ourselves. Someone got us out before the massacre, left us in the forest to die. We would have, if not for her. He gestured to Arden. Every eye in the room turned to her. The Alpha King's gaze was crushing. A human raised the lost princes of the Blackthorn line. She did. And you expect me to believe this? To accept your claim based on what? Sentiment? A story? Based on this. Kael pulled something from his pocket. A ring, silver and black, with a crest Arden had seen carved on buildings throughout the city. Our father's ring, passed down through the Blackthorn line for generations. You'll recognize the seal. He tossed it. The Alpha King caught it, examined it, went very still. Where did you get this? From the den where someone hit us 20 years ago. We found it 6 months ago when we finally remembered enough to return. Silence filled the throne room. Arden could feel the tension, thick enough to cut. If you are Blackthorns, the Alpha King said slowly, then you are high nobility, second only to my own bloodline. Your presence here changes the balance of power in this court. We're not here to change anything, Ronan said. We're here because you summoned us, because ignoring your summons would mean death. We came to be registered, to fulfill our obligations, and to secure protection for the one who saved us. Protection. The Alpha King's smile didn't reach his eyes. For a human, you ask much. We ask what's owed. She saved the Blackthorn line. That debt must be honored. Must it? The king stood. The room seemed to shrink around him. I see a human who knows our secrets, who represents a security risk, who has no place in our world. He walked down the steps, approaching them slowly. Arden forced herself to stay still, to not retreat even as every instinct screamed at her to run. I see, the king continued, a liability that should be eliminated. Kael moved, fast, positioning himself between Arden and the king over our dead bodies. That can be arranged. Power filled the room, crushing, absolute. Arden felt her knees buckle, caught herself, stayed standing through sheer stubbornness. Then Ronan spoke, voice cutting through the pressure. You want to know if we're really Blackthorns? Test us. Blood test, combat trial, whatever verification you require. But touch her, threaten her, and you'll have war. Because we're not the lost princes you remember. We're survivors. And we know how to burn everything down. The threat hung in the air. Audacious. Suicidal. The Alpha King stared at Ronan for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he laughed. Your father had the same fire. Same stupidity. He returned to his throne. Very well. You'll be tested. Blood verification first. If you pass, you'll be acknowledged as Blackthorns and given your rightful place in the hierarchy. The human... He paused. She'll be evaluated. We'll determine her fate after the testing is complete. That's not... Kael started. That's my offer, the king interrupted. Take it or leave. But if you leave, you're rogues, outlaws, and I'll have every pack in the kingdom hunting you by nightfall. Ronan and Kael exchanged looks. Arden could see the calculation in their eyes, the terrible math of impossible choices. We accept, Ronan said. The king smiled. Excellent. Guards, escort our guests to the noble quarters. Make them comfortable. Testing begins tomorrow at dawn. They were ushered out before anyone could protest. Arden's legs shook as they walked through corridors that all looked the same, following guards who didn't speak. Finally, they were shown to a suite of rooms, luxurious by any standard, but the heavy door and the guards stationed outside made it clear they weren't guests. They were prisoners. The door closed. Kael immediately spun to face Ronan. What the hell was that? You threatened the Alpha King. I called his bluff. That wasn't a bluff. He could have killed us all right there. But he didn't, because we're valuable, because we're Blackthorns. And killing us would mean answering uncomfortable questions about why he didn't protect us 20 years ago. Arden moved to the window, looking out over the city that glittered in the fading light. He's going to kill me anyway. You know that, right? He'll verify you're who you say you are, acknowledge your bloodline, and then quietly eliminate the human who knows too much. No. Kael crossed to her. We won't let that happen. How exactly will you stop him? He's the Alpha King. He has all the power here. Not all of it. Ronan's voice was hard. We have a name, a bloodline, a claim to nobility that predates his reign. If we play this right, we can force his hand. And if we don't, then we die fighting. Arden laughed, sharp, bitter. You keep saying that like it's supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to be honest. She turned to face them both. I should have stayed in the woods. At least there I knew the rules. Knew what was trying to kill me. Would you, though? Kael asked quietly. Really? Or would you always wonder what happened to us? The question hit harder than it should have. Because he was right. She would have wondered, would have spent the rest of her life watching the tree line, hoping to see two wolves that would never come home. I hate this, she said. We know. I hate that you lied. We know that too. And I hate that I still... She stopped, shook her head. Never mind. But Kael was watching her with those two knowing eyes, and she knew he'd heard what she couldn't say. Footsteps in the hall. A knock. The door opened to reveal a servant carrying an elaborate dinner tray. Compliments of the Alpha King, the woman said, setting it down. Her eyes flickered over Arden with barely concealed disdain. He hopes you'll find the accommodations acceptable. She left. Ronan examined the food with suspicion. Could be poisoned. Could be, Kael agreed. But if they wanted us dead, there are easier ways. They ate in silence. The food was incredible, nothing like the simple fare Arden had grown up with, but it sat heavy in her stomach, weighed down by fear and uncertainty. After, Kael claimed one of the beds. Ronan took a chair by the window, clearly intending to keep watch. Arden stood in the middle of the room, suddenly exhausted. Sleep, Ronan said without looking at her. Tomorrow's going to be worse. How comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, I'm here to keep you alive. The words should have stung. Instead, they steadied her. Because that was real. That was honest. And in a world of politics and lies, she'd take honesty even when it hurt. She claimed the second bed, fully clothed, and tried to sleep. Tried to ignore the fact that somewhere in this city, the Alpha King was deciding her fate. Tried to believe that two men she'd raised as wolves could actually protect her from a predator who wore a crown. Tried to forget that in the wild, when prey wandered into a predator's territory, survival was never guaranteed, and failed at all three. Dawn came with a knock that rattled the door in its frame. Arden jerked awake, disoriented, reaching for a knife that wasn't there. Across the room, Ronan was already on his feet, positioned between the door and the beds. Kael sat up more slowly, running a hand through his hair. Time for testing, a voice called from the hall. The Alpha King doesn't wait. They were given 10 minutes to prepare. Arden splashed water on her face from the basin, trying to shake off the exhaustion that clung to her bones. She'd barely slept, every sound in the unfamiliar building jolting her awake with the certainty that someone was coming to kill her. "Stay close," Ronan said as they were escorted out. "Don't speak unless spoken to directly. Don't make eye contact with anyone ranking above you, which is basically everyone." "I know the rules. Knowing and following are different things. Your instinct is to fight back, suppress it." Arden bit back a retort. He wasn't wrong. Every cell in her body wanted to push back against the authority pressing down on her, to prove she wasn't weak just because she was human. But Ronan was right. Fighting here would get her killed. They were led to a chamber deep in the palace, circular, with a domed ceiling and walls carved with symbols Arden didn't recognize. A crowd had already gathered, nobility judging by their clothes and the way they held themselves. They watched the proceedings with the detached interest of people observing entertainment. The Alpha King stood at the center beside an elderly woman whose hands were stained dark with something that looked like old blood. "The Blackthorn heirs," the king announced, "here to prove their claim through blood verification. Lady Essence will conduct the ritual." The old woman stepped forward. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, but her movements were precise. "Give me your hands." Ronan and Kale extended their hands without hesitation. The woman produced a knife, silver, wickedly sharp, and drew it across both their palms. Blood welled, dark and red. She caught it in a crystal bowl, murmuring words in a language Arden didn't know. The blood began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, until the bowl pulsed with silver light. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Blackthorn blood," Lady Essence said. "Pure lineage, unbroken." She looked up at the king. "They are who they claim to be." The king's expression didn't change, but something tightened around his eyes. "Very well. Rise, Ronan and Kale Blackthorn. The court recognizes your birthright and your rank as high nobility." Ronan and Kyle stood. Around them the crowd erupted in whispers. Arden caught fragments. "Thought they were dead. Changes everything. What does this mean for succession?" "However," the king continued, voice cutting through the noise, "there remains the matter of the human." All eyes turned to Arden. She forced herself to stay still, chin up, meeting no one's gaze directly but refusing to cower. "She saved our lives," Kyle said. "That creates a debt. That creates a liability," someone interrupted. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall, silver-haired, with a face like carved stone. "A human who knows our secrets cannot be allowed to leave. The law is clear." "The law allows for exceptions," Ronan countered, "for those who've rendered extraordinary service to our kind." "Service?" The man's laugh was cruel. "She raised 2 pups in the woods. That's basic decency, not extraordinary service." "Basic decency would have been leaving us to die." Kyle's voice went hard. "She fought a bear for us, starved to feed us, kept us alive through winters that killed grown men. If that's not extraordinary, what is? Irrelevant." The silver-haired man turned to the king. "Your Majesty, I petition for the human's execution. She's a security risk we cannot afford." Arden's heart hammered against her ribs. Executed. The word was so clinical, so final. "Lord Theron raises a valid concern," the king said slowly. "However, executing the one who saved the Blackthorn line would set an unfortunate precedent." "Then bind her," another voice called out. A woman this time, young and beautiful in a way that seemed designed to draw blood. "Make her swear the old oaths. Tie her life to theirs. If she speaks our secrets, she dies. If she betrays them, she dies. Problem solved." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "No." Ronan's voice cracked like a whip. "Those oaths are slavery. We won't condemn her to—" "You don't have a choice," the king said. His tone allowed no argument. "The binding or death. Those are her options. Choose quickly, or I'll choose for you." Silence fell. Arden looked between Ronan and Kyle, saw the horror on their faces, the helpless rage. "What are these oaths?" she asked. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Don't," Kyle said. "Arden, don't even consider—" "Tell me," Lady Essence spoke, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "The binding ties your life force to theirs. You'll be unable to speak our secrets to outsiders. The words will die in your throat. If you attempt betrayal, your heart will stop. If they die, you die. But if you keep faith, you live as long as they do. That's barbaric, Ronan snarled. That's survival, Lord Theron countered. She wants to stay in our world? Fine, but on our terms. Arden's mind raced. Death or slavery? Except it wasn't really slavery, was it? She'd already tied her life to theirs when she'd agreed to come here, already committed to their survival. And if the alternative was a knife in the dark, I'll do it, she said. No! Both brothers spoke at once. Arden, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. Kael moved toward her. These oaths are permanent, unbreakable. You'd be bound to us for life. I'm already bound to you. She met his eyes. Have been since I was 8 years old. This just makes it official. This is different. This is magic, compulsion. This is survival. She turned to the king. I accept the binding. The king studied her for a long moment. Interesting. The human has more courage than the nobles who raised her. He gestured to Lady Essence. Proceed. The old woman beckoned Arden forward. She approached on shaking legs, trying to ignore the weight of every stare tracking her movement. Kneel. Arden knelt. Lady Essence produced a different knife, bone this time, carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. Give me your hand. Arden extended her right hand. The knife bit deep, pain flaring white-hot. Blood dripped into the same bowl that still held traces of Ronan and Kael's blood. Lady Essence began to chant. The language was old, harsh, catching on consonants that hurt to hear. The bowl began to glow again, but this time the light was different, darker, threaded with red. Join hands with those you bind to. Ronan and Kael moved forward, reluctance in every line of their bodies. They took Arden's hands, their blood mixing with hers. The pain started immediately. Not in her hand, in her chest, like someone was threading wire through her ribs, wrapping it around her heart. She gasped, tried to pull away, but the magic held her fast. Lady Essence's chanting grew louder. The wire tightened. Arden's vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. Then suddenly, she felt them. Ronan and Kael. Not just physically, but deeper. Their fear, their rage, their desperate protectiveness. Emotions that weren't hers flooded through her, overwhelming, too much. The magic snapped into place with a sensation like bones setting after a break. Arden collapsed forward, caught by Kael before she hit the ground. It's done, Lady Essence said. She's bound. Blood to blood, life to life. She cannot betray them now without destroying herself. The king nodded. Rise, Arden Vale. You're no longer just human. You're Blackthorn Pack, protected under their name and subject to their authority. Subject to their authority. The words should have bothered her more. Instead, she just felt hollow, wrung out, changed in ways she didn't understand yet. Ronan helped her stand. His jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Congratulations, Lord Theron said, voice dripping sarcasm. The Blackthorns have acquired a pet. Say that again, Kael said softly, dangerously. Please. Theron smiled. Truth stings, doesn't it? She's bound now, owned. The brave human who raised wolves reduced to... Kael moved, fast enough that Arden barely saw it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Theron by the throat, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack stone. She's Pack, Kael snarled. Not a pet, not property. Pack. And if you or anyone else forgets that, I'll remind you personally. Enough! The king's voice boomed. Kael Blackthorn, stand down! Kael didn't move. His hand stayed locked around Theron's throat, rage radiating off him in waves. Now, the king said, or I'll have you bound in chains. Slowly, Kael released him. Theron slumped, gasping, one hand on his bruised throat. The ceremony is complete, the king said. You have your verification and your pet. Now get out of my sight, all of you. They were escorted back to their quarters by guards who kept hands on weapons, clearly expecting trouble. The moment the door closed behind them, Ronan rounded on Kael. What the hell were you thinking, attacking a high lord in front of the entire court? He called her a pet. So what? We knew they'd say worse. You can't lose control every time someone insults her. Why not? Kael's eyes flashed gold. She just bound herself to us. For life. Because we brought her into this nightmare. The least I can do is defend her honor. Her honor won't matter if you're dead. They faced off, tension crackling between them. Arden watched, still feeling the echo of their emotions through the new bond. Kael's fury, Ronan's fear. Stop, she said. Both men turned to her. Fighting each other won't help. We survived the verification. I'm alive. That's what matters. You're bound, Ronan said. That's not the same as alive. Maybe not, but it's better than dead. She moved to the window, putting distance between them and the complicated tangle of emotions she didn't want to examine. Outside, the city continued its daily rhythm, oblivious to the fact that her entire existence had just been rewritten. I can feel you, she said quietly. Both of you. Your emotions. It's overwhelming. It fades, Kael said. You learn to block it out, create barriers. How long does that take? Months, maybe years. Wonderful. Years of being invaded by feelings that weren't hers, tied to two people who'd already turned her life upside down. A knock at the door. Another servant, this one carrying an envelope sealed with the king's crest. For the Blackthorn heirs, she said, handing it to Ronan, you're summoned to the Alpha King's private chambers. 1 hour. Don't be late. She left. Ronan broke the seal, scanned the contents, and swore. What? Kael asked. He wants to discuss our future. Specifically, our obligations to the bloodline. Ronan's expression went dark. He's going to try to marry us off. Of course he is, Kael laughed bitterly. Can't have two unmated males of noble blood running around. Might disrupt the precious hierarchy. What about Arden? What about her? She's Pack, not a marriage prospect. They'll probably assign her some servant role, keep her close enough to monitor but far enough to forget about. Arden's chest tightened. I'm right here. Sorry. Kael ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, and you're probably right. She turned back to the window. I'll be the human pet they tolerate because they have to. Background decoration in someone else's story. That's not... It is. And I knew it coming in. She forced steel into her voice. You two go. Deal with whatever political games the king has planned. I'll stay here and practice being invisible. Silence. Then Ronan. We could refuse the marriage offers. And give him a reason to declare you unfit? To strip your titles and execute all three of us? Arden shook her head. No, you'll do what you have to do. Marry whoever strengthens your position. Secure your place in this world. And you? Kael asked quietly. I'll survive. It's what I'm good at. They left 30 minutes later dressed in formal clothes that transformed them from the wolves she'd known into princes she barely recognized. Arden watched them go, feeling the bond stretch, but not break. A tether connecting her to two people who were rapidly becoming strangers. She was alone for maybe an hour before the door opened again. Not a servant this time. A young woman, elegantly dressed, with auburn hair and eyes that assessed Arden like she was livestock. So you're the famous human. She circled Arden slowly. I expected someone more impressive. Sorry to disappoint. Oh, I'm not disappointed. I'm relieved. The woman smiled. My name is Seraphine Moreau. My father is the king's chief advisor, and I'm here to help you understand your new reality. How generous, isn't it? Seraphine settled into a chair, graceful as a cat. Here's how this works. The Blackthorn brothers are valuable. High nobility, strong bloodlines, politically advantageous. Every family in this court is going to be angling for marriage alliances. I'm aware. Are you? Do you understand that they'll be married within the month? That their wives will have authority over you? That you'll spend the rest of your life watching them build families with other women while you remain the bound human in the background? The words hit like arrows, each one finding its mark. Arden kept her expression neutral. If you have a point, make it. The point is you have options, Seraphine leaned forward. Leave, now, while you still can. I'm bound to them. I die if they die. The binding can be broken. It's difficult, dangerous, but possible. I can arrange it. Seraphine's smile sharpened. For a price? What price? Information. Tell me everything you know about the Blackthorns, their weaknesses, their fears, their secrets. Give me ammunition to use against them, and I'll set you free. Arden stared at her. You want me to betray them. I want you to save yourself. They brought you here, bound you, trapped you in a world where you'll never belong. Don't you think you deserve better? For a moment, Arden almost considered it. Almost let herself imagine walking away, being free of the bond, the politics, the suffocating weight of a culture that would never accept her. Then she remembered 8-year-old Ronan, pressing against her for warmth during a brutal winter. Remembered Kyle bringing her his first kill, so proud, so eager for her approval. Remembered 10 years of loyalty, of trust, of love that transcended species. Get out, she said. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. I'm not betraying them. Seraphine's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. Fine. Seraphine stood, all pretense of friendliness gone. Enjoy your cage, little human, because that's all you'll ever be here. A bird in a gilded prison, watching the people you love build lives you can never be part of. She swept out, leaving Arden alone with words that echoed too close to her own fears. Ronan and Kael returned hours later, tension written across both their faces. How bad? Arden asked. Bad. Ronan poured himself a drink from the decanter on the side table, downed it in one swallow. He has candidates lined up, daughters of noble houses, each one more politically advantageous than the last. He wants answers by the end of the week, Kael added. Who will marry? When? How many heirs will produce to strengthen the bloodline? So pick someone. Both men looked at her like she'd suggested they cut off their own arms. We don't want, Kael started. What you want doesn't matter. What matters is survival. You taught me that. Arden forced herself to sound practical, detached. Marriage here is political, strategic. Find someone who strengthens your position and gives the king what he wants. And what about you? Ronan asked. What about me? You're bound to us. Forever. How are you supposed to... I'll figure it out. I always do. The words came out sharper than intended. Kael flinched. The bond carried his hurt directly to her chest, making it hard to breathe. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Kael moved toward her. Arden, look at me. She did. His golden eyes were intense, conflicted. I don't want to marry some stranger, he said quietly. I don't want a political alliance or an advantageous match. He stopped. The bond flooded with emotion, want, need, longing so intense it made her dizzy. Kael, Ronan's voice held a warning. Don't. Why not? She can feel it anyway. The bond doesn't lie. Kael's hand came up, fingers grazing Arden's cheek. I've wanted you since I was old enough to understand what wanting meant, since before I knew I could be human. Since always. The world narrowed to his touch, his words, the raw honesty bleeding through the bond. Arden's voice failed. Kael, this isn't fair to her, Ronan said. She's bound. She can't leave even if she wants to. Putting this on her now. I'm tired of pretending. Kael's thumb brushed her jaw. 10 years I've been beside you. 10 years of wanting to tell you how I felt and being trapped in a body that couldn't speak. Now I can finally say it, and you want me to stay quiet? I want you to think about what you're doing. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else. Arden's heart hammered. She could feel Ronan through the bond too, his fear, his frustration, and underneath it something that felt dangerously like the same longing Kael was broadcasting. This is insane, she whispered. Probably. Kael smiled, crooked and uncertain. But when has that stopped us? He leaned in. Arden knew she should pull away, should remind him that this was a terrible idea, that they had bigger problems than complicated feelings. Instead, she closed the distance and kissed him. The bond exploded. Every wall she'd been trying to build shattered, and suddenly she was drowning in sensation, her own feelings tangled with Kael's, want and relief and joy so intense it burned. She pulled back, gasping. Kael's pupils were blown wide, gold bleeding into the whites of his eyes. Tell me you didn't feel that, he said. Tell me I'm alone in this. You're not. The words fell out before she could stop them. You're not alone. Across the room, something crashed. Arden turned to see Ronan with his back to them, shoulders rigid, one hand braced against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. "Ronan?" Kael's voice held concern. "Brother?" "Don't." Ronan didn't turn around. "Just don't. If this is about, it's about everything." Ronan finally faced them. His expression was carefully blank, but the bond betrayed him. Hurt, jealousy, and underneath it a grief so deep it made Arden ache. "You want her. Fine. Take her. But understand what that means." "What are you talking about?" "The king will never allow it. A Blackthorn prince marrying a human? It's political suicide. They'd strip your title, exile you, maybe kill you for the insult." "Then we don't tell them," Kael said. We what? Hide it? Pretend? How long do you think that would last with everyone in this court watching our every move?" Silence fell, heavy and choking. "There's another option," Arden said slowly. Both men turned to her. "You marry who they tell you to, secure your position, and she swallowed hard. "I stay in the background. We accept that this, whatever it is, can't happen." "No," Kael's voice was flat. "I just got you. I'm not giving you up. You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice. Not here there isn't." Arden's control finally snapped. "Look around, Kael. We're not in the woods anymore. There are no simple solutions. You can have me or you can have your birthright, but you can't have both." The words hung between them, truth crystallizing into something they couldn't ignore. "She's right," Ronan said quietly. "This is the choice. Your title and your duty, or her. Choose." Kael stared between them. Through the bond, Arden felt him fracturing, love and obligation tearing him apart. "I choose her," he said finally. "I don't care about the title or the politics or any of it. I choose Arden." Joy and terror warred in Arden's chest. "Kael, you can't just watch me." He turned to Ronan. "Tell the king I'm rejecting his marriage candidates. Tell him I'm claiming Arden as my mate. He'll have you killed. Let him try. This is suicide. This is freedom." Kael's eyes blazed gold. "Our whole lives we've been running from who we're supposed to be. Well, I'm done running. I want Arden. I'm keeping Arden. And if the Alpha King has a problem with that, he can—" The door exploded inward. Guards poured in, weapons drawn. Behind them, the Alpha King himself strode through, power radiating off him in waves. "Kael Blackthorn," he said, voice cold as winter. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to violate the blood laws and endanger the Blackthorn lineage." "What?" Arden stepped forward. "He hasn't done anything." "He declared his intent to mate a human. That's a crime against our kind." "How did you—" Kael's expression went slack with realization. "You were listening. I'm always listening." The king smiled. "Did you think I'd leave two untested nobles unsupervised? Every word you've spoken in this room has been monitored." Horror crashed through Arden. Every private conversation, every confession, every moment they thought was safe, all of it heard, all of it used against them. "Your Majesty, please." Ronan stepped forward. "My brother spoke in anger. He didn't mean— He meant every word. I could hear it in his voice." The king gestured to the guards. "Take him to the cells. He'll stand trial tomorrow for crimes against the kingdom." "No!" Arden lunged forward. A guard caught her, twisted her arm behind her back hard enough to make her scream. Kael shifted, half human, half wolf, a nightmare of teeth and rage. He took down 3 guards before they subdued him with chains that glowed with the same magic that had bound Arden. "Stop fighting," the king commanded. The power in his voice forced Kael to his knees. "You're only making this worse." "What's the punishment?" Ronan's voice shook. "For what he's accused of. Death by combat. Tomorrow at dawn." The king turned to leave, paused. "Unless, of course, you'd like to offer an alternative." Ronan went very still. "What kind of alternative?" "Marry one of my candidates. Tonight. Bind yourself to a proper match, strengthen your bloodline the right way, and I'll spare your brother's life. He'll be exiled, powerless, but alive." The trap closed around them with brutal efficiency. Save Kael by sacrificing everything, or watch him die. "I'll do it," Ronan said. "I'll marry whoever you choose. Just don't kill him. No. Kale struggled against the chains. Ronan, don't you dare. Done. The king smiled. The ceremony will be held in 3 hours. Ronan Blackthorn, you'll marry Lady Seraphine Moreau and assume your duties as a high lord of this court. Kale Blackthorn will be exiled at dawn, and the human... His gaze landed on Arden. The human will remain here, bound, watched, a reminder of what happens when you try to defy me. He swept out. The guards dragged Kyle away, still fighting, still screaming Arden's name. Ronan stood frozen, his face carved from stone. Arden felt the bond stretch and scream as Kyle was pulled farther away. Felt Ronan's devastation crash into her own. Felt the world they'd built together shatter into pieces too small to gather. And understood finally that the Alpha King hadn't just won. He'd destroyed them. The wedding happened in a blur of ceremony that felt more like a funeral. Arden stood in the back of the hall, flanked by guards who'd been assigned to ensure she didn't make a scene. She watched Ronan stand beside Seraphine Moreau, the same woman who'd tried to buy information from her hours earlier and speak vows that bound him to a stranger while his brother sat in chains below the palace. Seraphine smiled throughout the ceremony, victorious, smug, like she'd won some game Arden hadn't known they were playing. Through the bond, Arden felt Ronan's emotions, rage buried under layers of control, grief so deep it threatened to drown them both, and underneath it all, a cold determination that scared her more than the rage. When it was done, when Ronan had kissed his new wife with all the passion of a man signing his own death warrant, Seraphine turned to survey her conquered territory. Her gaze found Arden and held, that same satisfied smile curving her lips. "The human looks ill," she said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Someone should escort her back to her quarters. Wouldn't want her to embarrass the Blackthorn name on such a joyous occasion. The dismissal was clear. Arden was to be removed, hidden, made invisible now that the real players had claimed their positions. But as the guards moved toward her, Ronan's voice cut through the murmurs. "She stays." Seraphine's smile faltered. "Darling, surely you don't expect—" "She's Blackthorn Pack. She stays for the reception." Ronan's tone allowed no argument. "Or are you already questioning my authority?" The threat was subtle but clear. Seraphine's expression tightened, but she inclined her head with false grace. "Of course. How thoughtful of you to include your pet in the celebrations." The word landed like a slap. Arden felt Ronan's fury spike through the bond, but he kept his face neutral, playing the political game with a skill she hadn't known he possessed. The reception was torture. Arden stood in corners, ignored by some, pitied by others, while Ronan circulated with his new wife, accepting congratulations and building alliances with every handshake and false smile. She caught glimpses of him throughout the night, his jaw tight, his eyes dark, his entire body radiating tension despite the celebration happening around him. Once their gazes met across the crowded hall. The bond flared, carrying his silent apology, his helpless rage. Then Seraphine pulled him away, and the moment broke. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Finally, when Arden thought she might scream from the suffocating weight of pretense, a hand touched her elbow. Lady Essence stood beside her, those clouded eyes somehow seeing too much. "Walk with me, child." It wasn't a request. Arden followed the old woman out of the hall, through corridors that twisted deeper into the palace, until they reached a small garden lit by moonlight. "You're wondering why I brought you here," Lady Essence said. "Among other things." The old woman's lips quirked. "You have spirit. Good. You'll need it." She settled onto a stone bench, gesturing for Arden to sit. "The binding I performed on you, do you understand what it really means? I'm tied to them for life. I can't betray them without killing myself. True, but incomplete." Lady Essence pulled a small vial from her robes, the same one that had held their mixed blood. "The binding works both ways. You cannot harm them, but they also cannot harm you, not directly, not through negligence, not by allowing others to destroy you. The magic enforces balance." Arden frowned. "I don't understand." "Ronan just married another woman while bound to you. The magic recognized that as abandonment, as harm." Lady Essence held up the vial. Their blood inside it had turned dark, almost black. The binding is deteriorating. In a few weeks, maybe less, it will break entirely. Horror flooded through Arden. If it breaks and they die, you die. Yes. The old woman's expression was grave. But there's another problem. The binding was the only thing protecting you. Once it breaks, the king will have no reason to keep you alive. Then we fix it. Strengthen it somehow. It can't be strengthened. The damage is done. Lady Essence leaned forward. But it can be transferred. What? The binding can be moved from Ronan to someone else. Someone whose life path doesn't conflict with yours. Understanding crashed over Arden. Kael. He's being exiled at dawn. If the binding shifts to him alone before he leaves, you'd be tied only to him. Ronan would be free to fulfill his duties without the magic punishing you both. And Kael? Would be bound to you for life, unable to take another mate, unable to return to court, stuck with a human companion in permanent exile. Lady Essence's gaze was steady. It's not a kind fate. Why are you telling me this? Because the Alpha King is making a mistake. He thinks breaking you will make the Blackthorns compliant. But I've lived long enough to know that cornered wolves are the most dangerous kind. She pressed the vial into Arden's hand. If you want to survive, you'll need to make a choice. Transfer the binding to Kael and live in exile, or stay bound to both of them and die when the magic collapses. That's not a choice. No, Lady Essence agreed. It's survival. And you're very good at that, aren't you? She left Arden alone in the garden, holding a vial of darkening blood and the weight of another impossible decision. Arden didn't return to the reception. She went instead to the cells beneath the palace, bribing a guard with the only thing she had, information about Lord Theron's gambling debts that she'd overheard during the reception. The guard let her through with a warning. 10 minutes. Then I'm dragging you out. Kael's cell was small, dark, carved from the same black stone as the king's throne. He sat against the far wall, still in chains, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. When he saw her, something broke across his expression. Relief, pain, love so raw it hurt to witness. You shouldn't be here, he said. Probably not. Arden crossed to him, sank down on the cold floor. But I needed to see you. Is he treating you okay? Ronan, I mean. Now that he's... Kael's voice caught. Now that he's married. He's surviving, like we all are. This is my fault. If I hadn't said anything, if I'd just kept quiet, then we'd all still be trapped in a lie. Arden reached out, took his chained hands in hers. Kael, I need to tell you something. She explained what Lady Essence had said. The deteriorating binding, the choice between death and exile, watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to resignation. So you'd be stuck with me, he said when she finished, bound to an exile with no power, no future, nothing to offer but survival in the wilderness. We've done survival before. That was different. We were together by choice then. And we'd be together by choice now. Arden squeezed his hands. Kael, if this is what it takes for both of us to live, then this is what we do. What about Ronan? The question hung between them. Through the bond, she could feel Ronan in the distance, his new wife beside him, his duties pressing down, his heart fracturing under the weight of everything he'd sacrificed. He made his choice, Arden said quietly. He chose to save you, to save us both. This is how we honor that. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then, when I was young, really young, before I understood what wanting meant, I used to watch you sleep. You'd curl up between us, and I'd stay awake for hours just listening to you breathe, memorizing the sound so I'd never forget it. You met her eyes. I knew I loved you before I knew what love was. And now you're asking me to let you bind your entire life to mine. I'm not asking. I'm choosing. What if you regret it? What if I don't? He pulled her closer, awkward with the chains, until their foreheads touched. If we do this, I'm never letting you go. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what we face. You understand that? Yes. And you're sure? Instead of answering, Arden kissed him. Gentle this time, deliberate, a promise sealed between their lips. When they broke apart, Kael was smiling despite the tears on his face. Okay, he said. Okay, let's survive this. Te. Lady Essence performed the transfer in Kael's cell, an hour before dawn. The ritual was faster this time, less ceremonial. She cut their palms, mixed their blood, chanted words that made Arden's teeth ache. The moment the magic shifted, she felt Ronan's presence in the bond begin to fade. Not disappearing entirely, they'd shared too much for that, but receding, becoming distant, until he was barely an echo. In his place, Kael blazed bright and fierce, his emotions flooding through her with an intensity that stole her breath. "It's done," Lady Essence said. "You're bound only to each other now. Ronan is free." Free. The word should have brought relief. Instead, Arden just felt hollow. "Does he know?" she asked. "He will soon enough." The old woman gathered her tools. "The exile party leaves at dawn. Be ready." She swept out, leaving them alone in the cell. "How do you feel?" Kael asked. "Different." "You?" "Like I can finally breathe." He flexed his hands. The chains had been removed for the ritual and not replaced. "Through all of this, the one thing I couldn't stand was knowing I was going to lose you. Now we're bound for life. It's the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me." Arden laughed, despite everything. "That might be the most honest thing anyone said in this entire palace. Honesty's easier when you've got nothing left to lose." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Guards appeared, a dozen of them, led by a stern-faced woman who introduced herself as the Exile Escort Commander. "Kael Blackthorn, by order of the Alpha King, you are hereby exiled from Silverpine and all territories under shifter law. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and say your farewells. Then you leave and do not return under penalty of death." "Understood," Kael said. His voice was steady, but through the bond, Arden felt his grief. Leaving behind not just his brother, but the life he might have had, the future that had been stolen. They were escorted to the quarters they'd shared, the rooms that had been a prison and a sanctuary both. Someone had already packed Kael's meager belongings into a worn pack. Ronan stood by the window. He turned when they entered, and Arden saw the moment he felt the change in the bond. Saw understanding dawn across his features, followed by relief so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "You transferred it," he said. "We didn't have a choice," Arden replied. "The binding was killing us both." "I know. Lady Essence told me." Ronan crossed to them, moving like every step hurt. "I'm sorry. For all of this. For bringing you here. For the binding. For—" "Don't!" Kael gripped his brother's shoulder. "You saved my life. You sacrificed everything. Don't apologize for that." "I'm losing you both." "You're setting us free." Kael pulled Ronan into an embrace. "We'll survive. We always do." Ronan held on like he was drowning. Through the fading bond, Arden felt his control finally crack, felt the grief pour out unchecked. "I should have fought harder," Ronan whispered. "Should have found another way." "There was no other way. We both know that." They stood there for a long moment, two brothers saying goodbye to a future they'd never get to share. Then Ronan pulled back, composed himself with visible effort. "When you're out there, stay north. There are territories beyond the king's reach where exiles gather. Find them. Build something." "What about you?" Ronan's expression hardened. "I play the game. Build power. And when I'm strong enough, I tear this whole corrupt system apart from the inside. That could take years." "Then it takes years." Ronan turned to Arden. "Take care of him. He's reckless when he's angry." "I know. I raised him, remember?" Ronan's smile was brief but genuine. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A ring, small and simple, with a stone that caught the light. "This was our mother's. I don't remember her, but I found it in the den where we were hidden. I want you to have it." He pressed it into Arden's hand. The metal was warm, almost alive. "Ronan, I can't." "You can. You're family. You've always been family." He stepped back. "The escort is waiting. You need to go." Kael shouldered his pack. Arden slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, settling into place like it belonged there. They left without looking back, following the guards through corridors that led down and out, away from the palace and the life that might have been. The city was just waking as they passed through it. People stared, some with pity, others with satisfaction. Arden ignored them all, focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not thinking about the fact that she was leaving the only person who'd ever tried to protect her. At the city gates, the exile escort commander stopped them. "This is as far as we go. Beyond this point, you're on your own. Travel north or south, but do not return. If you're spotted within our territories, you'll be executed on sight." "Understood," Kyle said. They stepped through the gates. Behind them, Silver Pine rose against the dawn sky. Beautiful, terrible, a world they were no longer part of. "Which way?" Arden asked. Kyle looked north, then south, then at her. "You choose. This is your life too." Arden thought of the north, of exile communities where they might find safety. Thought of the south, wild and unmapped. Thought of running, of hiding, of surviving in the margins of a world that didn't want them. Then she thought of something else entirely. "What if we don't run?" Kyle frowned. "What? What if we don't go north or south? What if we go back?" "Back to what? The city just exiled me. If we return, not to the city, to the woods. The cabin." Arden's mind raced, pieces falling into place. Think about it. The king's authority comes from controlling shifter territories, but our cabin was outside those territories. It's unclaimed land. That doesn't change the fact that I'm exiled from shifter territories. But if we're on unclaimed land, technically, you're not violating the terms. She grabbed his arms. "Kael, we survived there before. We know that land better than anyone. What if we go back and build something, not hiding, not running, but claiming our own space?" The king would see it as defiance. Let him. What's he going to do? Exile us twice? Arden felt wild hope rising. We spent 10 years in those woods. We know every trail, every water source, every place to hide. If he sends people after us, we have the advantage. Kael stared at her. Then slowly, he started to smile. "You want to go home. I want to survive on our terms, not his. It's crazy. Everything about this is crazy." He laughed, bright and genuine for the first time since this nightmare started. "All right, let's go home." They turned east toward the forest that had raised them, toward the cabin that had been their sanctuary. Behind them, Silver Pine continued its morning routine, unaware that the exiles it had dismissed were about to become something far more dangerous. Two people who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. What? The journey took 3 days of hard travel. They moved fast, avoiding roads, sticking to game trails and waterways that wouldn't show their passage. Kael hunted, Arden gathered. They fell into old patterns, old rhythms, rediscovering the partnership that had kept them alive when they were young. The bond helped. Arden was still getting used to the constant awareness of Kael's emotions, the way his feelings bled into hers and vice versa. But it also meant they could coordinate without words, could sense danger or opportunity through each other's reactions. By the time they reached familiar territory, Arden felt more like herself than she had since leaving. The cabin was exactly as they'd left it, small, rough, perfect. Kael stood in the clearing, looking at it with an expression somewhere between relief and grief. "I thought I'd never see this place again," he said. "Neither did I." They spent the first day cleaning, repairing, making it livable again. The second day, Kael hunted while Arden checked their old supply caches, finding some still intact. The third day, Ronan arrived. Arden saw him first, standing at the edge of the clearing, dressed in travel clothes instead of his noble finery, looking exhausted and furious and relieved all at once. "You're supposed to be in Silverpine," she said, "and you're supposed to be in exile." Ronan stepped forward. "Guess we're both breaking expectations." Kael emerged from the cabin, froze when he saw his brother. "How did you find us?" "I know you. Knew you'd come back here." Ronan's gaze swept the clearing. "I told Seraphine I needed to inspect our northern holdings. Bought us maybe 3 days before anyone questions my absence." "Why are you here?" "Because I've spent the last 3 days in that palace realizing something." Ronan moved closer. "The king won. He broke us apart, married me off, exiled you. He got everything he wanted, and we let him." "We didn't have a choice," Arden said. "Didn't we?" Ronan's eyes blazed. "What if instead of playing by his rules, we made our own? What if instead of accepting exile or marriage as our only options, we found a third path?" "What path?" Kael asked. "This one." Ronan gestured to the cabin, the woods, the unclaimed territory. You were right, Arden. This land is outside his jurisdiction. If we claim it, build something here, we're not technically violating any laws. We? Arden echoed. I'm done being his puppet, done sacrificing everything for a system that only wants to control us. Ronan's voice went fierce. I spent 10 years with you in these woods. They were the best years of my life. Why am I fighting to stay in a world that wants to destroy the people I love? Your wife is a political arrangement, nothing more. She knows it. I know it. The whole court knows it. Ronan looked between them. But you two, you're my family, my pack, and I'm done choosing duty over the people who actually matter. Through the faded bond, Arden felt his sincerity, his determination, felt the choice he was making, the bridge he was burning. If you stay, the king will come after you, she said. He'll see it as rebellion. Good. Let him come. Ronan smiled, sharp and wild, more wolf than man. Because I'm tired of being prey. Time to remind him what happens when you corner a blackthorn. Kael laughed, sudden and bright. You really want to do this? Build a life out here, outside the system? I want to be free. Don't you? The brothers looked at each other, and Arden saw the future crystallize between them. Not the life they were supposed to have, but the one they were choosing. Raw, uncertain, dangerous, free. Then we do it together, Kael said. The three of us, like it should have been from the start. Ronan pulled them both into an embrace. Through the bond, both the fading one and the new one, Arden felt their emotions collide and merge. Hope, fear, determination, love that transcended blood and magic and impossible choices. The king's not going to let this stand, she said into Ronan's shoulder. When he realizes what you've done, then we'll be ready. Ronan pulled back. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Right now, let's just be home. They spent that night around the fire, planning. Ronan had brought supplies, coin, information about the political landscape. Kael knew the woods, the best hunting grounds, the safest water sources. Arden understood survival, knew how to make something from nothing. Together, they started building. Not a kingdom, not a court, just a life. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Arden let herself believe they might actually survive it. They had 6 weeks of peace before the war came. 6 weeks of rebuilding the cabin, expanding it, making it sturdy enough to withstand whatever was coming. Ronan worked with an intensity Arden had never seen, like he was trying to outrun his own thoughts. Kael hunted, scouted, mapped every trail within a 10-mile radius. Arden planted, preserved, prepared. They didn't talk about what they were preparing for. Didn't need to. The bond had changed since Ronan returned. The magic that had faded was rebuilding itself differently. Not the forced connection of the original binding, but something chosen. Voluntary. Stronger for it. Late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, Arden would lie between them and feel their heartbeats synchronize with hers. Would wonder how something so wrong by the court standards could feel so right. The warning came on a morning that started like any other. Arden was checking snares when she felt it through the bond. Kael's sharp spike of alarm. She ran back to find both brothers standing at the clearing's edge, staring at a messenger arrow buried in a tree. Black fletching. The king's seal. Ronan pulled it free, unrolled the message tied to the shaft, and read aloud. Ronan Blackthorn, you have 3 days to return to Silverpine and resume your duties, or be declared rogue and hunted accordingly. Your wife awaits. Your king commands. Do not test my patience further. Silence fell over the clearing. He knows, Kael said. Someone told him where we are. Seraphine, probably. Ronan crumpled the message. She never wanted a husband. She wanted the Blackthorn name and the political power. When I disappeared, she had every reason to send hunters after me. 3 days, Arden said. That's not much time. It's not meant to be. Ronan met her eyes. He expects me to panic, to either run farther or come crawling back. He doesn't expect resistance. Can we resist? Kael asked. He'll send his best hunters, trained killers who've been doing this for decades. Let him. Ronan's smile was all teeth. We know this forest. They don't. And we have something they'll never understand. What's that? Nothing to lose and everything to protect. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Ronan had military training from his years before the massacre, fragmented memories that were coming back stronger now. He taught them tactics, showed them how to turn the forest itself into a weapon. Hunters rely on tracking, on following scent and sign, he said, demonstrating how to lay false trails. We make them chase ghosts, exhaust them, pick them off when they're separated and confused. You're talking about guerrilla warfare, Arden said. I'm talking about survival. Kael set traps. Not the simple snares for rabbits, but elaborate constructions designed to maim and kill. Arden hated them, hated the necessity, but she helped anyway because the alternative was dying. On the third day, they came. Arden smelled them first, the scent of too many predators in one place, moving with coordinated purpose. Through the bond, she felt Ronan and Kael go on high alert. 12, Kael said, nose to the air. Maybe 15, coming from the south. More than I expected. Ronan checked his weapons, knives, a bow he'd crafted, tools meant for war. They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers. Do we run? Arden asked. We fight. Ronan looked at her steadily. But you don't have to. Kyle can get you out, take you somewhere safe. No. She grabbed a knife, testing its weight. I've been running my whole life, from hunger, from cold, from a world that wanted me dead. I'm done running. Kael touched her face. You don't know what you're asking for. Combat is survival. And I'm good at that, remember? The hunters broke through the tree line an hour later. They came in formation, military precision, each one covering another's blind spot. Arden recognized the silver-haired man leading them immediately, Lord Theron, the one who'd called her a pet, who'd pushed for her execution. Ronan Blackthorn, he called out. You've been declared rogue. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. How generous. Ronan stepped into view, flanked by Kael. Arden stayed hidden, bow drawn, like they'd planned. What about my brother? My wife? Your brother is already in exile. He dies regardless. As for your wife, she's already chosen a new husband. My son, actually. The marriage will be annulled by week's end. Ronan's expression didn't change, but through the bond Arden felt his cold satisfaction. Seraphine had played her hand too obviously, and it gave him leverage. So this isn't about duty, Ronan said. This is about your family, taking my title. This is about eliminating a threat to order. Theron gestured. His hunters spread out, encircling. You could have been great. Instead, you chose to play house in the woods with a human whore and your disgraced brother. Kael moved, fast. He took down the nearest hunter before anyone could react, teeth in the man's throat, blood spraying. Chaos erupted. Arden loosed an arrow, taking a hunter in the leg. Not a killing shot. She wasn't ready for that yet, but enough to slow him. Around the clearing, Kael's traps activated. Screams echoed as hunters fell into pit traps, were caught by snares that yanked them into the canopy. Ronan fought with brutal efficiency, using the forest like he'd been born to it. Every tree was cover. Every shadow was an escape route. He led hunters into ambushes, separated them, made them vulnerable. But there were too many. Arden saw one break through toward her position. She fired, missed, scrambled backward as the hunter shifted mid-stride. Human to wolf, massive and snarling. She was going to die. She knew it with absolute certainty. Her knife was too small, her skills too limited. Then Ronan was there, intercepting the wolf with a force that shook the ground. They went down together, a tangle of teeth and claws and rage. Through the bond, Arden felt his pain when claws raked his side, felt his determination as he fought through it, felt the moment he won, when the other wolf went limp beneath him. Behind you! Kael's voice, desperate. Arden spun. Another hunter, human-shaped, knife drawn. She raised her bow but knew she wouldn't be fast enough. The hunter lunged. Arden threw herself sideways, felt the blade slice across her ribs, pain flaring white-hot. She hit the ground hard. The hunter loomed over her, knife raised for a killing blow. Kyle hit him like a freight train. The impact carried both of them 20 feet, crashing through underbrush. Arden heard bones snap, heard screaming, then silence. She struggled upright, hand pressed to her bleeding side. The clearing was a nightmare. Bodies, blood, the scent of death thick in the air. But they were winning. Of the 15 hunters who'd come, 8 were down. The rest were retreating, realizing too late that they'd walked into a trap designed by people who knew this land better than they knew their own names. Lord Theron stood alone, his hunters either dead or fled. He stared at Ronan with something like disbelief. "This is impossible. You're outnumbered, outmatched. We're desperate." Ronan stalked toward him, blood dripping from half a dozen wounds. "And you forgot what that means. Forgot that the Blackthorns didn't become high nobility by playing nice. The king will send more, an army if he has to. Let him. We'll kill them too." Ronan stopped an arm's length away. "Or you can take a message back. Tell him the Blackthorns are done bowing. We claim this territory as our own, and anyone who crosses our borders dies. You can't—" "We just did." Ronan's smile was terrifying. "Run, Theron. Run back to your king and tell him the wolves are no longer tame." Theron ran. They watched him disappear into the forest, then Kael collapsed, exhaustion hitting all at once. Ronan caught him, lowered him gently. "We did it," Kael said, voice rough. "We actually did it. We survived." Ronan looked at Arden. "You're hurt." "I'll live." She pressed harder against her ribs, trying to slow the bleeding. "We all will." But even as she said it, she knew this was just the beginning. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. The weeks that followed were tense. They fortified their position, expecting retaliation. Arden's wound healed slowly, leaving a scar that matched the one across Kael's chest, marks of survival, badges of battles won. But the king's army never came. Instead, something stranger happened. Other exiles began appearing, rogues and outcasts who'd heard rumors of shifters who'd defied the Alpha King and lived. They came carefully, hands raised in peace, asking for sanctuary. "We can't take them all in," Ronan said after the fifth group arrived. "We don't have the resources." "We have the territory," Kael countered, "and they're offering to help build, to fight if needed. We could use the numbers. Or they could be spies. Or they could be exactly what they say, people tired of the king's tyranny." Arden listened to them debate, understanding slowly crystallizing. "You're building a pack." Both brothers turned to her. "Not intentionally," Ronan said. "You're building a pack," she repeated. "A real one, not based on bloodlines or politics, but on choice, on people who want to be here." Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "If we do this, if we really build something here, it changes everything. We become a symbol, a challenge to his authority." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," Kael said. They accepted the exiles, slowly at first, carefully vetting each one. But as word spread, more came. By summer's end, they had 40 people living in the territory. By autumn, 70. They built houses, established borders, created laws based on consent and mutual protection rather than hierarchy and dominance. And they waited for the king's response. It came in the form of an envoy. Not hunters this time, a diplomat, accompanied by a small guard carrying a formal proposal sealed with the royal crest. Lady Essence delivered it personally. "You've created quite the stir," she said, settling into the chair they'd offered. The cabin had grown, expanded into something that could almost be called a hall. "The king is displeased." "I'm devastated," Ronan said flatly. "You should be. He could crush you, send an army that would wipe this little rebellion off the map." She paused. "But he won't." "Why not?" "Because you're more useful as an example." Lady Essence unrolled the proposal. "He's willing to recognize your territory as autonomous, to grant you sovereignty over this land and everyone in it. In exchange, you swear non-interference. You stay here, you don't challenge his rule elsewhere, and he leaves you alone." Kael leaned forward. "There's a catch." "Of course there is." The old woman's eyes glittered. "Ronan's marriage to Seraphine is annulled. She married Lord Theron's son 2 months ago, citing abandonment. You're free of that particular burden. And you acknowledge the king's authority, publicly. Send him tribute once a year to maintain the peace." "Tribute," Ronan's voice went dangerous. "Like we're vassals. Like you're pragmatists who understand that symbolic gestures prevent actual bloodshed." Lady Essence met his gaze steadily. "Pride is expensive, boy. Sometimes survival requires swallowing it. Arden watched the struggle play out across Ronan's face, the need to fight warring with the need to protect the people who'd come here seeking safety. "How much tribute?" she asked. "A tithe of your harvest. A symbolic amount, really. Enough to maintain the fiction that he's still in control. And if we refuse? Then he sends an army. Kills everyone here, salts the earth so nothing ever grows again." Lady Essence's tone was matter-of-fact. "He's given you a way to live, Blackthorn. I suggest you take it." The decision took 3 days of debate. The pack, because that's what they were now, voted. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted peace. In the end, pragmatism won. They accepted the king's terms. The formal ceremony happened on neutral ground, witnessed by representatives from both sides. Ronan swore an oath that carefully avoided any language of submission, promising only non-interference and annual tribute. The king, watching from his throne via a magical projection, looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But he accepted, granting them sovereignty over what they'd started calling the Wild Lands. As they left, Lady Essence pulled Arden aside. "You did well," she said. "All of you. You survived something that should have killed you. It almost did, several times. But it didn't. And now you have something rare in our world, freedom." She pressed something into Arden's hand, the vial from the original binding, now clear as water. The magic recognized what you built. It rewrote itself. You're not just bound to them anymore. You're pack, real pack, the kind that can't be broken by death or distance. What does that mean? It means you won, child. Against a system designed to destroy you, you won. Lady Essence smiled. Don't waste it. Winter came to the Wildlands with the kind of cold Arden remembered from her childhood. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. The pack had built enough structures to house everyone comfortably. They had food stores, a functioning government based on consensus rather than dominance, and a reputation that kept most trouble at bay. And Arden had a family. She stood at the edge of the clearing, expanded now, barely recognizable from the small space where she'd first raised 2 wolf pups. Kael was teaching a group of younger shifters how to track. Ronan was mediating a dispute about water rights. Normal problems. Manageable problems. She felt him before he spoke. Ronan's presence in the bond, warm and familiar. Thinking deep thoughts? Thinking about how strange this is. A year ago, I was alone in the woods, hunting rabbits. Now I'm part of a pack, bound to 2 men who used to be wolves, living in a territory we claimed from a king. Regrets? He came to stand beside her. Surprisingly, no. She looked up at him. You? I regret the marriage. Regret that we had to fight for this instead of being given the choice. He paused. But I don't regret you, either of you. It still felt strange, the 3 of them. The court would have called it unnatural, wrong, but they'd stopped caring what the court thought. Kael joined them, slipping an arm around Arden's waist. Council meeting in an hour. Something about expanding the southern border. More growth? Ronan sighed. We're going to need better infrastructure. We'll manage, we always do. They stood together, watching the pack move through the settlement they'd built. Watching proof that there were other ways to live, other structures beyond the rigid hierarchy the king enforced. Do you think he'll ever accept this? Arden asked. Really accept it? No, Ronan said, but he doesn't have to. As long as he leaves us alone, we can build something better here. And if he doesn't leave us alone, then we remind him why the Blackthorns were feared before they were nobles. Ronan's smile was sharp. We survived his best hunters, survived his politics. We'll survive whatever comes next. Arden believed him, not because survival was guaranteed, nothing ever was, but because they'd already done the impossible, had taken a situation designed to destroy them and turned it into something worth protecting. She thought of 8-year-old Arden, standing between a bear and 2 helpless pups, armed with nothing but a branch and stubborn refusal to let innocence die. She'd been surviving ever since. Alone, desperate, making impossible choices. But she wasn't alone anymore. And the choices, while still hard, were hers to make. Come on, Kael said, tugging them both toward the hall. Council meeting, then dinner. Then we can finally have that conversation about what to name this place. The Wildlands is too generic. I like it, Arden protested. You like everything if it means avoiding making decisions. That's not true. I made plenty of decisions, life or death decisions. And now you can make naming decisions, much less stressful. They bickered good-naturedly as they walked, the bond carrying their affection like a current beneath the words. Around them, the pack went about their business, cooking, building, living. Proof that there were other ways to exist, other hierarchies, other families. 3 months later, a messenger arrived from Silverpine. Not a threat this time, an invitation. The Alpha King was hosting a gathering of all pack leaders, a summit to discuss territory disputes and trade agreements. Attendance was optional, but strongly encouraged. It's a test, Ronan said, reading the invitation for the third time. He wants to see if we'll come, if we'll acknowledge his authority in front of the other packs. Do we go? Kyle asked. They debated for hours. Finally, Arden made the decision. We go, but on our terms. We go as equals, not as vassals begging for recognition. That's going to anger him. Good. Let him be angry. As long as he honors the agreement, his feelings don't matter. They traveled to Silverpine with a small delegation. The city looked the same, beautiful, oppressive, built on hierarchy and power. But Arden wasn't the scared human she'd been before. She walked through those gates with her head high, flanked by 2 men who'd chosen her over crowns and duty, backed by a pack that existed because they dared to say no. The summit was held in the throne room where they'd first been judged. Every major pack leader attended, watching with curiosity as the Blackthorns entered. The Alpha King sat on his throne, expression carefully neutral. Ronan Blackthorn, you accepted my invitation. We accepted a summit invitation. Let's not pretend it was yours to give. Ronan's voice carried through the hall. We're here as leaders of the wildlands, autonomous and sovereign, not as subjects seeking approval. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Challenging the king's authority in his own throne room was either bravery or suicide. The king's eyes narrowed. Careful. You have sovereignty because I allow it. No. We have sovereignty because we claimed it and you couldn't take it back. Ronan stepped forward. You sent your hunters. They died. You sent your envoys. We negotiated as equals. Now you're trying to reassert dominance by summoning us like subjects. You dare! I dare because I have nothing to lose. You've already taken everything that mattered to you, my title, my marriage, my place in your court. What's left? You can't exile me again, can't kill me without breaking the treaty. So yes, I dare. Silence fell. Every eye in the room tracked between Ronan and the king, waiting to see who would break first. Then, impossibly, the king laughed. You really are Marcus's son. He had the same fire, same stubborn refusal to bend. He leaned back in his throne. Very well. The wildlands are recognized as autonomous territory. You attend this summit as equals, not subjects. Satisfied? For now. The king's smile was cold. Don't push your luck, boy. I may respect your courage, but I won't tolerate actual rebellion. Then don't give us reasons to rebel. They locked gazes for a long moment. Then the king gestured dismissively. Take your seat. Let's discuss actual business instead of posturing. The summit lasted 3 days. Trade agreements were negotiated. Borders were adjusted. The wildlands gained formal recognition from other packs, establishing them as a legitimate power. On the final night, as they prepared to leave, Seraphine found Arden in the gardens. I underestimated you, she said without preamble. Thought you were just a human playing at belonging. I was wrong. Were you? You survived the court, survived exile, built something from nothing. Seraphine's expression was almost respectful. That takes more than luck. It takes desperation and stubbornness. I'm good at both. Clearly. Seraphine paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad Ronan found you. He was never meant for this world, too honest, too loyal. He would have been eaten alive here. And you? I belong here. Always have. She smiled without warmth. We all find where we fit eventually, even wild things like you. She walked away, leaving Arden alone with her thoughts. Wild things. Maybe that's exactly what they were. Too rough for the court, too fierce for polite society, surviving on instinct and love, and the stubborn refusal to accept the lives they were supposed to want. Kael found her there, slipping an arm around her waist. Ready to go home? Home. The wildlands. The cabin-turned settlement. The pack they'd built from outcasts and exiles. Yes, Arden said. Let's go home. They left Silver Pine at dawn, the city growing smaller behind them until it disappeared entirely. Ahead, the forest waited, wild, untamed, exactly where they belonged. Arden thought of the girl she'd been, 8 years old and armed with nothing but a branch. That girl had been surviving alone, fighting for scraps, expecting nothing but hardship. She'd never imagined this. Never dreamed she'd have a family, a pack, a home that was hers, not because someone allowed it, but because she'd claimed it. The bond carried Ronan's contentment, Kael's joy, carried the certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. No crowns, no courts, no expectations they didn't choose for themselves. Just survival, love, and the wild freedom of building something that belonged to no one but them. And in that impossible space between civilization and wilderness, they'd finally become unstoppable.